If you see the universe is neither friendly or unfriendly, it doesn't really matter what you do. But if you indeed see the universe as friendly, then you will align yourself with how it works. You use all your resources to align yourself with how you work, how it works, and you align. There's a lawfulness in the universe. So if you live according to those laws, then you're going to be fine. So I use this example all the time. You don't have to believe in gravity, the law of gravity, but if you jump up, you will come down. So it has nothing to do with belief. But once you understand that, once again, if you're honest about it, you're open about it, you're willing to acknowledge that, okay, that's how it is, then how do I use gravity in a way that helps me? So you might talk about Michael Jordan, Air Jordan, where he can float, stay up in the air longer to do whatever. But it might even seem like he defined gravity, or he learned how to work with gravity, or whatever. So it's understanding that. And once I understand that, then I know, like, to me, and people used to say to me, people I haven't seen in recovery for 20, 30 years, they say, oh, you're the dude that talked about connecting to higher power. Because that's what I would say. I said, start off like there's a wall socket, just plug in the power source. So I'm not getting into what your religious beliefs or anything. All I know is there's a power source, there's a font that you can connect with, that you have access to energy, the power. That's one reason why I call my book The 5 Superpowers. That's about creating your own power plant.
Yeah, and it's incredible.
So
you plug in
your own node to connect to higher power, and it's positive. I'm not talking about negative, because you could. That's why we call it right mindfulness, right concentration, right effort. Because you can have concentration, mindfulness, and effort, but it's wrong mindfulness. You could be really good. Of course, around here, they even made a movie about The Town. It's known that most of the cats in the prison, they come from Charlestown, they're bank robbers. So, and to be bank robber, you have to be really, you use effort, you use concentration, you use mindfulness, but it's not right, because it's not based on wholesome or doing things that move towards peace and harmony, goodwill. It's the opposite. It's coming from the fear wolf instead of coming from the love wolf, or the growth mindset.
Yeah, and that expectancy theory is real, right? I mean, where your attention goes, your focus goes, the energy flows, and so, good begets good. And if you're looking for good, you'll find good, and if you're looking for bad, you're going to find bad. You got that confirmation bias, that ego that wants to prove you're right. So,
yeah, that's the energy font. They call it canalizing or whatever. When you're set with a certain tendency or habit patterns, it does that. And so I would say, I love to say, if you don't know what your intention is, then follow your attention.
Well said.
But your attention is going to be a reflection of your intention. And most of our intentions are unconscious. And so that's a big part of the process of being mindful, or knowing yourself, is knowing your intention, even though it's unconscious. But if you watch it, you'll know it. So one of the things that I had to fight with, because of my ego of coming from the inner city and being tough, I don't get stressed. And I used to say, I don't get stressed. And then when I started listening to my body, when I learned the mind-body process, I noticed that even though I said I wasn't stressed, there was a part of me that says, dude, I don't know what you're talking about, but there's some stress in here because your shoulders are up around your ears. So that was how I was able to just watch myself and say, okay, so even though I don't feel stressed, there's stress in the system, because my body is, they call it the hip, this axis, where adrenaline and all this stuff, you get in a high state of arousal, when you fight, flight, or freeze, and you wait and exhale and all that stuff. And then by just watching that, then I can open to the possibility, even though I don't feel it, I can act as if I am. Let's say it's true. And then once I do that, then I can work with it. And that's the same thing with getting through denial, because people laugh when I use the old adage that I used to hear early on. And they used to say to me, denial is not a river in Egypt.
That's right. Not.
That was what I heard all the time, because they knew that denial is what prevents us from getting there. And the people who don't get clean or don't transform or change are people who are not capable of being honest with themselves or accepting things as they are. And so that's why it's really important. I keep bringing up the how. How do you do it? Honesty, open-mindedness, willingness.
Yeah, it's amazing, and I think there's two things. But before we wrap up here, I'm so grateful for your time. I know this is your quote unquote downtime, but I do want to break a little bit of the myth about mindfulness and about meditation before we get off, because you've been obviously instrumental in my own meditation practice and my own development of a spiritual connection, much more so than I had before we met. And I think one of the things that you did for me was to break down this concept of meditation being some elevated, floating kind of perception that you've got to really, clear your mind. And when what you told me was that it's a practice, and that it's a non-judgmental practice, and that
right.
it was the idea of practicing, exercising your mind and focusing, whether it was on the breath or, on a singing bowl or whatever you were going to put my attention on. And that if my mind were to wander, my only objective was to bring it back to the breath or bring it back to wherever I wanted it to be. And it really freed me up, because I had all this judgment, around meditation, and everyone says, oh, you got to, to meditate, you have to clear your mind. And it's really a practice. And, if you could just maybe help break the myth around that. I know you have a world famous analogy of meditation, which really makes it easy from your man. But, maybe just break down the myth of what actual mindfulness and meditation is, so people can feel a little less intimidated by it, friend.
Yes. So it's interesting, because I run into this with clients all the time. And so there's a process that goes through. So if you look up the word meditation, it says meditation is to contemplate. And if you look up the word contemplation, it means to look at closely or to look at repeatedly. And so meditation is something we don't just do when we close our eyes. We're meditating on something from the time we wake up to the time we go to sleep. And I like to refer to the philosopher Dr. Dre. And he says, I got my mind on money, money on my mind. That's meditation. So whatever your mind is on, remember I said to contemplate is to think about closely, or to look at closely, or to think about or look at repeatedly. So even though you're not looking at it, if your mind is on hate, you got hate on your mind. If your mind is on frustration, you got frustration on your mind. And so on some level, it could be that simple. It's just really understanding, well, what's on your mind? And sometimes we don't know we have hate on our mind until we just gave somebody the bird when they cut us off on the road. We give them hand language, sign language, which is not really skillful, because it could lead to, actual fisticuffs or shots or whatever. So it's really thinking about what we're really talking about is the idea that we can direct attention. This is what William James said. He said, volitional effort is the effort of attention. So when we talk about free will, is we actually have this ability to hold a thought in mind longer than it would normally be in mind. We can choose that, but it's a training. You have to choose yourself. So when people say your mind should be blank, that's not what meditation is. That's not how I know it to be, because there's always thinking going on. But can you be aware of thoughts without being lost in it? So if I'm meditating and I keep thinking about the pink elephant, or just thinking about the pink elephant, I keep the pink elephant in my mind. So there's some things. So the initial instructions are to direct your attention to one thing, and when it gets lost and when you get distracted, the way I was taught is you just bring it back, or you bring it back to your object. So if I'm focusing on my breath and I breathe, and then I hear a loud noise, or fire engine goes by, or the phone rings, or the bell rings, my attention goes right to there. And the idea is just to notice, okay, so I'm focusing on sitting and breathing, but my attention is on some of these thoughts, and it could be thoughts about what I'm going to do, could be planning for later on, or what I didn't do that I need to do. And you just notice that you're thinking, and then the idea is to come back to the object. And so when I teach people how to be with the breath and the body, even if the eyes are open, you can just have a little sense of just sitting, what that feels like to sit, and to breathe, to notice that your breath is coming and going. And just by being aware of that, and then I get lost with, okay, yeah, but what about this or whatever? But what happens is we're always judging and seeing if we're doing things right. So when I ask people to just be with one object, if you spend the whole 5 minutes, 15, 20, an hour, whatever your time is, if you spend the whole time just getting distracted and then resetting, starting over again, that would be well worth your time.
Because our brain is made to solve problems. That's what our brain is for. And we have to give it the direction to go. And so ladder thoughts is what I call them. It lets your brain believe that it's possible to create a new neural pathway in your brain, even though you might not be thinking I'm creating a new neural pathway. What you're doing is you're creating a different way of thinking. And most people can understand and relate to that. And so to be able to practice that, it takes practice, just like lifting weights. You have to put in the time to retrain your brain. And if you're used to anxiety, if you're used to fear and feeling stuck, to not be stuck or to not feel as fearful. I don't think we ever get rid of anxiety or fear. It's kind of part of life, which is another part of my philosophy, is that life's 50-50. And I think we think we're going to go from 0 to 60 or to this life that's just happy or easygoing and never experience difficult emotions. But if we allow difficult emotions to be part of the process, they're not as intimidating. We're like, oh, I'm human and I'm experiencing anxiety.
Right.
So that's how I do that.
I love it. What a great practice. And I like the idea of thought ladders, because thought stacking, it's that, I know my negative mantras can stack pretty high. And, next thing I know, I'm under a bridge in a cardboard box and, all alone just because, a client didn't call me back. I have the ability, but what I don't think people understand is that, so many studies have been done on the psychological privilege we pay to the past and our brain being heavily biased towards negativity. It is a bit of a force field that draws us that way, and it protected us. And it's a bit kind of, from our primitive brain and how it developed, and research has been done on it. So it is a bit like a force field. That's why, it's interesting to hear you say it takes energy, because you really are moving a big ship, that being your mind, in a different direction through a different practice. And it does take energy. So I love the idea of thought laddering and being open to possibilities. And you've created so many new possibilities for yourself. When people are in, call it a faith crisis, in their own moment, I mean, and again, I'm drawn so heavily to your this perspective that, that this faith was it was your salvation, and to lose your salvation means, do I have any salvation? What are the kinds of things, what are the lessons you've learned that you teach your clients that are in a faith crisis or struggling with leaving the faith of it? Because although you're primarily into helping people that are leaving the Mormon faith, it really does apply to anybody who's been kind of raised in a faith that they haven't looked any place else for. So what are the things that you do for people?
Yeah, most of my clients are Mormon transitioning to whatever comes next for them.
Yeah.
But I have worked with, I would call them high demand religions, the religions that is more than just sitting in a pew on Sunday. It is your social structure. It is everything. So yes, my podcast is called Ex-Mormonology, but the principles apply to any type of leaving a high demand religion. So I think the hardest part, one of the hardest things, there's many pieces, but is feeling, I remember wanting to be so desperately understood by my Mormon family. And most of my family is still in the church. So I love my Mormon people. My leaving the faith, that's why it was so painful, because I do love the people. But it wasn't them, it was the history of the church, but I digress. I think what happens is, when I realized I have to love and understand myself and not expect that from my Mormon family, I was able to let them be who they are while I was learning and evolving. So when clients come to me and they're like, my husband doesn't get me, my mom, my parents, my siblings, I help them process that's okay. Why would they understand this when they haven't been through it exactly like you have? And there's some relief that people feel from that, because I mean, we as humans, we want to be validated. We want to be loved and understood at a fundamental level. And when you're pulling or extracting yourself out from what was your whole life, you're the one changing, you're the one evolving, and your friends, family in the religion that you're living, they are looking at you with bewilderment on their face because they love still the church. And so we become the ones that people aren't sure what to do with, because we're kind of what's the word I'm looking for? We're oh, I can't think of the word. We're bucking the system. We're going against
breaking the mold.
Yeah. And so to be able to validate yourself as you go through this process is everything.
Yeah, this is, what I pick up so strongly from you, and even over Zoom, it's amazing how the essence of your personality is captured. Because I can tell you that when I was anticipating this conversation, having not met you or spoken with you, I anticipated that there would be this bit of begrudging or animosity towards the faith and its people because you left it. And so I always assume, when you pull away from something that, you've got to kind of push it in the rearview mirror, maybe even vilify it a little bit to feel free in what you're doing. I love what really comes off of you is this radical acceptance of everybody and everything, and that their choice is theirs, and you may not have agreed with it, but you've got this incredible acceptance of everybody and this compassion and connection to people that are Mormon and your family and the choices you've made. And you talked a little bit about anger in the beginning. Is this something, is this radical, is this acknowledgement all come from, and I think I'll bring this full circle in a second, because I think you talk so much about accepting ourselves. Once we've really accepted ourselves, our true essence and who we are, what other people do, whether it's religion or sports or professionally, that FOPO, fear of other people's opinion, it all kinds of settles down a little bit when you focus on you, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, because we think we can, we think we can control all the people and all their thoughts. And once we realize we can't do that our brain and our feelings and emotions and thoughts are the only thing we have any control over, that's the empowerment piece. I won't say I was never angry or that I still don't have anger, but I keep it in perspective and let it be there when it comes up. And I think going through an anger stage is very normal and natural. And when you see it as, it's the secondary emotion, right? It's covering up something else, which is, generally speaking, from a faith crisis perspective, deep grief and deep sadness of that connection you feel like you have lost from your loved ones. So that's where the crux of the work is, because once you can love yourself, and even if you get angry, even when you have the days you don't want to get out of bed, even when you feel like, what the fuck just happened to my life, and you allow it to be there without making it mean that you're wrong or bad or that you can't figure it out. It's just like, I'm a human experiencing anger. That's it. That's what's happening. What's underneath that? Now we can get to work when we can admit that. When we push away our anger, I call it the time capsule. It's like the emotional time capsule. If we keep pushing down all those emotions, just like a time capsule people put under a tree and unearth 50 years later, those emotions that are never processed are just going to be sitting there waiting for you.
Yeah, that's wow. And let me add from my own experience, and you can nod if you can agree with me. I think they don't, those things we shove down, they don't just sit in the box dormant. They grow. They have a little energy of themselves. And I think you accepting, or all of us accepting that anger and then working through that anger is what's allowed it to dissipate for you. If we just stuff it and push it and never deal with it, when it comes out, it can be rage. I mean, it can transform itself into something ugly that we're not prepared to deal with. And so you're right. I think people say, there's a lot of things they'll say feelings aren't facts or don't trust you. It's like, feelings to me, and what I hear you really describing more eloquently, they're a bit like traffic signals. They just exist, like, and some of them are good, and some of them don't feel good, and some of them are really scary, but they're all just telling us, they're all just information. Slow down, stop, keep going, and I think what I've learned, and what I'm so impressed with you is in a healthy way learning to accept and deal with those feelings, like on an assembly, like, oh, here's anger. This is anger. I'm not going to hurt myself. I'm not going to hurt anybody else. I'm going to be responsibly angry. I'm going to process and think about it, maybe get it out, maybe hit a pillow, maybe, scream in the car and hold, whatever it is, I'll get it out of my body. But I'm not going to deny the fact that I'm sad, disappointed, angry, whatever that feeling is. I think that's been so amazing.
Yeah. And the thing that's hard, at least from the faith crisis perspective, but I would think this could be with any type of ideology you're moving through, is that from the faith crisis perspective, when the members still in the church see you getting angry, they're like, see what happens when you leave, see what happens.
Yes.
And so then you're like, I have to suppress this anger because I don't want them to think I'm angry. But that goes back to what I was talking about earlier, is it is part of the process. It comes with the territory, and we can think and we can push it off like, oh, I'm not going to be angry. It's fine. Cause I did that for many years.
Yeah.
But like you said, it waits for you. Like the body remembers. And that's why it's so important to process feelings. Because whether you think, well, it's not real, your body thinks it's real. It doesn't know the difference. And so until you're able to process, and that's one of the things I do with my clients, is help them physically process emotions. Like I said, because if you don't, they're just going to wait for you. And it could show up in a year, 10 years, 20 years down the road, and it will feel just as real as the origin of that emotion.
So where the brick analogy comes in, and the time I've used it that gets probably referenced the most is with a UFC fighter named George St. Pierre.
Right.
And when I met George, we were at a lunch or a breakfast at an Eggs Up Grill in Montreal. He had just lost his UFC title to Matt Serra about 5 weeks before. He got knocked out in the first round as an 11-1 favorite. Matt Serra had won the Ultimate Fighter reality TV show to get the right to step in the ring with George. And George had just beaten Matt Hughes, who was the icon of the middleweight or welterweight division. And he's like, and everyone's saying, oh, you're going to run through this guy. This guy doesn't deserve to be in the cage with you, the whole thing. So George loses the fight because he's not prepared. He's not mentally in the right space he needs to be at. And at that level, if you're in the UFC, you're always one punch away from winning a fight. And as we're sitting down at this lunch, I pull this black brick out and I take out a silver Sharpie. I said, George, tell me what all the things you're holding on to from this fight. Let my fans down. People say I'm a paper champion because it's harder to keep the belt than to win it. I left half of my purse in the octagon, biggest upset in UFC history. I'm a failure. Boom, all this stuff. I'm writing it down on the brick. I said, hold this brick for 5 seconds over the table. No problem. So could you hold it for 5 minutes? He holds it for about 2 minutes. I go, okay, you can relax. I go, could you hold it for 5 minutes? Yes. What if I asked you to hold it for 5 weeks? He's like, Brian, there's no way I could hold this for 5 weeks, man. My arm would fall off. I'd have to sleep. He's laughing. And he goes, so I said, George, here's the point. 5 weeks ago, you got knocked out. You underperformed. You lost your first fight you lost your second fight in the UFC. What have you learned? Because when an airplane crashes, we go looking for the black box. When the black box gives us the information of why the plane crashed, what did we learn? Failure is positive feedback. He's like, man, I took this guy lightly, and I can never take any opponent lightly in the UFC because they're all world class. He goes, 3 weeks before the fight, I probably wasn't training as serious as I should have. I thought I could flip the switch because I was just going to be better than this guy, and I learned the hard way that they can't do that. And he's like, so this has been the worst thing for my career, and I said, and it's going to become the best thing for your career because you're going to learn the value of preparation, and separation is in preparation. So I said, take this brick. And what you've been doing for the last 5 weeks is carrying this brick psychologically. You can't see it, but it's wearing you down as if you have a 5-pound brick that you're carrying all the time for 5 weeks. If you threw a vest on, okay, if you wanted to try this as an analogy, and I used to be 240 pounds, 60 pounds heavier than I am sitting here today. And I had a mentor give me a 40-pound weighted vest. He said, Brian, I want you to walk around in this all day. At the end of the day, when you take it off, you'll notice how much better you feel. I remember taking the vest off and I was like, oh my God, I feel so much better. And he's like, when you take the vest off, call me. And I called him. And he said, see how much better you feel? I said, yeah. He goes, that's how it's going to feel when you go from 240 to 200, get to work.
Wow.
And what the 40-pound vest did for me is it gave me a reference and an awareness of what that difference would feel like. But it's really hard to read the label when you're inside the jar, because awareness of change, like, you don't see it in yourself. That's why, as we're getting that smoothie today over at Mario's place, right? Mario the banker, Mario Banks, right? Professional wrestler Mario Banks. Let's see if I can steal his line today, Charlie. He says, hey, Mario Banks, the best investment you can make. It's a guarantee, not gambling, and you can take that to the bank. I thought that was pretty awesome.
It is great.
He's sitting there making these smoothies, and you look in his shop, right? And there's all these before and after pictures. So when you look at the before and after picture, you go, wow, what a transformation. Well, that transformation that we look at in the picture, the before and after, there is a long time between those two pictures. And when you're in the label, you don't see that transformation happening because you're inside yourself. You don't see it. That's why the photos are so important, to see where you came from to where you are now. Because if you don't have those photos, all you see is now.
Yeah.
And now is always evolving in one way or the other. So having a reference point of where you were to where you are now, and making what I call your best your baseline. Like my best level of fitness in 2015, best, if I had trained all of 2015, that's a baseline now. That's what I wake up at every day. And we're constantly trying to do that to become the best version of us, is make my best my baseline.
And we talked about not wishing it was easier, just keeping to work harder.
Yeah.
And changing physical attributes of ourselves takes one set of emotional muscles and support, and getting ourselves fit does. But I think you're pointing out, which is really important, especially for people that are suffering in silence, is that self can't see self. And so when people are overcoming, when they've got this adversity that they're facing, what's the go-to? What's the number one kind of mental performance tool that you're giving people that are stuck, that are feeling the weight of that last brick? How do we help people release the brick? I know we can show them what it likes to carry it, and we can feel like what it's like, but how do we help people actually release that brick?
To me, the first step is the learning. What'd you learn from this? How do you make this adversity your advantage? Because when you ask a better question, you get a better answer. And by asking yourself, how can this be better for me? How can I learn from this? How can this propel me to a level I would have never gotten to had it not happened for me? Because it's never happening to you, it's always happening for you. Then they get a better answer because they ask a better question. And then I start to try to go to strategy. And my friend and mentor, Dr. Rob Gilbert, always says ability plus strategy plus get off your anatomy equals results, right? So A plus S plus GOYA equals R. Ability plus strategy plus get off your anatomy equals results. And what I like to try to do is help people first realize it's possible. And I'll do this, I'll write down the word impossible. And then put an apostrophe between the I and the M and a space between the M and the P. And it's still the same letters as impossible, but now we read it as I'm possible. And how we become more possible is I have a game plan of, okay, where am I? Where do I want to go? What are the strategies that I put into play to get there? Another way to say it is I call it my 4-step goal formula. And step 1 is set your intention. Intention. Here's where I am. There's where I want to go. Here's how I'm going to get there. And I might start with something as simple as make your bed every day and start your day with a win. Show that you're in control. Show you can act different in how you feel. Show you can pay attention to detail. And show that you can follow through on something long after the feeling is left. Start making your bed.
Can you, and I want to go through all 4 steps, but this is, I think people that want to overcome anything in their lives feel like they got to make these big, huge strides. Like I got to get from here and I want it to be like this because I don't like how I feel now. I don't like the situation I'm in now. I just want it to go away. And so sometimes, and I've seen people look for that quick fix and it's not lasting. They say enthusiasm is common, but commitment is rare. And you can get really excited about how you're going to do it, but then you set these big, audacious objectives about what you're going to do tomorrow. I'm going to run a marathon. I'm going to start running 10 miles tomorrow. And you might do that for a day, but we start to back off fast. And how important is it to make these, to understand the importance of small, simple steps?
I like to use a reference from the book, The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy.
Yeah.
And he says, would you rather have a check for $3 million or a penny that doubles every day for a month? And when I ask that to audiences, 80% of the people raise their hand on $3 million. They want it quick, they want it fast, they want it now, they want it easy. But if you take a penny and double it every day, it's not until day 29. At day 29, that penny is worth $2.5 million. So it's not till day 30 that penny is worth $5 million and you're ahead. But if it's a 31-day month like it is in October, that penny is now worth $10 million at the end of a 31-day month. They call it the compound effect. And that is the benefit of the small, slow daily. That's the benefit of do a little, a lot. That's the benefit of eat the elephant one bite at a time. That's the benefit of it's the start to stops most people. That's the benefit of the journey of 1,000 miles starts and begins with a single step, however you want to say it. And that's why the 4-step goal formula 1 is, what is my intention? I want to write a book. Okay, write the first page, write the dedication, get it started, create a Word document, open it up, give it a name, put it on your desktop of your computer, carve out a time of your day where you're going to write in it, because that's step 2. Step 2 is schedule it. So step 1, what's my intention? Write a book. Step 2, schedule it. What am I going to write? I'm going to write 6 to 6:30 every morning. Boom. Measure it. How many days a week are you going to write from 6 to 6:30? Well, 5 days a week, because I get up that early 5 days a week before I was going to school as a high school athletic director. So 5 days a week, I got up and I wrote 6 to 6:30 on my computer. And some days I found a flow and I would write until 7:30 and I would miss my workout because I was so into it. Other days I'd write for 10 minutes and go, I got nothing today. And I'd start my workout earlier. But I would always sit at the computer at 6 o'clock. And that's when I wrote my first book. Set the intention, schedule it, measure it 5 days a week. And then the last step of the 4-step goal formula is to reflect and refocus. So as you are going through this journey of trying to overcome, ask yourself every day, at the end of the day, when your head hits the pillow or when you're brushing your teeth, if that's a trigger that most people do every night, what do I need to start? What do I need to stop? What do I need to continue? Based off of my behavior today, what must I start doing better tomorrow? And be small, simple. What must I stop tomorrow to improve my behavior from today? And you know what? What did I do well today that I want to continue? And when you do that, start, stop, continue as a part of your reflection process, it gives you a game plan for the next day. And when you have a game plan and you know what that next step is, to start, to stop, or to continue, that can give you momentum for the next day and give you hope for the next day, because you now know what it looks like for you to just be a little bit better tomorrow than you were today. And if you can be a little better tomorrow than you were today and a little better today than you were yesterday, that's called progress. And you do that for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, you will get where you want to go.
Yeah, I mean, it's that to bring that full circle. So I've done that exercise on my calculator, as you showed me, the compound effect. And what I find I find two things interesting about that truism. First is you get about halfway through the month and it's only $600.
Yeah.
You get to day 20 and it's only about $6,000. And that's where I feel like people start to say, fuck, I should have taken the $3 million. I'm disappointed. I might as well give the pennies back, right? I only got 6,000 because I'm such an idiot for not taking the $3 million. But if you just keep with it, a penny a day compounding, if you just take the 6,000 and say, I got from here to there, and I know it's not the $3 million yet, but it's still better than I started, the gift always comes. And it's I think so many people give up on their commitment and give up on that discipline of continuing to just compound every day and to just write another 30 minutes. It's like, I still don't have a book done in 15 days. I thought I'd have a book done if I wrote 30. No, you have to keep writing 30 minutes until day 31 or whatever that day of completion is. But I think the importance of the second part of motivation starts from movement, but it's that commitment and recommitting every day that keeps you going until you can affect the change you wanted.
One of the biggest things is being open and not trying to hide anything. It still shocks me because I have a really hard time grasping my head around the fact that I don't even know where they correlate the word embarrassment and diabetes. I really actually cannot put the two together. I really don't get it. It's still really hard for me because I'm like, I don't understand. It's not like an embarrassing thing. It's literally a health thing. There's nothing embarrassing about it. So it's still hard for me to dawn on that people associate the two, but I know that obviously is a thing and people deal with that.
Do you think that comes from people's view of just, we have this normal and anything outside of what we think everybody else deals with is going to be an embarrassment?
Yeah. And
I do too.
I think that's why, but it's really weird for me because I'm
right.
I'm I don't get it. I'm like, what's embarrassing? It's not like you
Thank you.
I don't know. I just really don't understand. So that's the biggest thing I think is being open. I know this is probably not proper etiquette to people who are afraid of needles, but I take a shot whenever, wherever, and I do not care. I will whip out my needle and I whip out the pen, I put on my needle and I take the shot, or I finger prick. And if people are like, what is that? I'm like, oh, it's my insulin. It doesn't dawn on me to be like, I need to excuse myself. I'm going to go to the bathroom and take a shot. Even when I had a pump, I would take the pump out, or I would like change my pump in front of people. Like that was never like oh, I need to like mask this, or I need to hide it, because I was like, what's there to hide? Like I remember going to the bathroom I was out to dinner somewhere. I'm blinking. Oh, I think I was at the Grill in Westlake. And I remember walking in and this girl was taking a shot in the bathroom. And I was like, that is so strange, because I mean, if I'm going to the bathroom anyways and I have my purse with me, then I'll be like, oh, well, while I'm going to the bathroom, I'll just take the shot really quick. But like I take it out at dinner all the time, or in a classroom. I remember I would do it all the time. I never hesitated. But that's the biggest thing, is like to just be open, because nobody cares. And if they do care, then they kind of suck. Sorry. But like, I'm like, that's a crappy person. Like, I cannot imagine if my friends were like, you should really go in the bathroom and do that. I'd be like, well, then we're not friends, because yeah, that just should not even be I mean, it's life. Like that's what life is. It's not a perfect view. And like nobody lives in a perfect world. And if somebody says they do, they definitely do not. There's something that they deal with. And also, I mean, I have an account on my Instagram that's a diabetes account. And I originally made it just for like diabetes, not even awareness, but kind of just like, oh, maybe I could just like, if people ask for like a tip on something, I can be like help to them or anything. Cause I would like look like, I wonder what other people are doing, or like when their blood sugars go high, what their like solution is to it. And honestly, I've actually met like quite a few people through my Instagram, and I'm not like somebody who's like big social media person. Like, oh, I like, I'm not really like that, but this has been cool because it's like another kind of community of people that I've ended up like exchanging phone numbers, and now we'll like text about things. Or I'm like, hey, by the way, if you like, have you ever experienced, and I like tell them my problem, and then they'll kind of give me their solution. And I'm like, okay, awesome. Thank you. And so that's been like a big support, because even though your family is like your number one, but it can be hard, because no matter what, even though they deal with helping you with your decisions and me explaining, but they still don't really like know internally what it feels like, or like what your blood sugars are. So it's nice to have somebody else who does, because it's like you can just say something and they get it. And I'm like, yes, I can just explain it.
And so where can people follow you? Because I think, in my opinion, what I find is that community is important. It's, for like-minded people that identify with, it's like me, the community around recovery that I've built, because there's so many similarities between what we face every day, like going to dinner and say, hey, you haven't had a drink in 8 years. Why can't you just have a glass of wine? It's like, well, because, I'll break out in handcuffs. I mean, I'll end up in Vegas. I'll be, because it'll kill me, and whether it kills me when I have the first drink, or whether it would kill you to have the first piece of cake, over time, those behaviors don't serve me. And so I don't engage in them. But the identity of like-minded people that suffer, you are dealing with, and I don't want to use the term suffer. I want to use the word dealing with and overcoming the same challenges is really helpful to have that community. So what's the place people can follow your diabetes Instagram?
So mine is, it's T1D and then _ Sammy, SAMI. And that's on Instagram. But I use it honestly as like a source I try to give like any opinions I have or like tips I have, but I also use it to gain insight from a lot of other people.
Sure.
And it's hard because I think there's what were you gonna say? Sorry.
How important is that to you? I mean, I hear this kind of service, being of service to others and being helpful to others, kind of, and now hearing about, this future of yours in the LMFT world. Is that something that helps you to deal with this, being of service to other people?
Yeah, I think it really does. Cause it's like, I've gained so much. I feel like I've gone through every single like lifestyle diet there is with this thing. And so I'm like, I'm just going to give you my honest opinion. And I know there's some people who deal with it and just take the insulin, they eat pizza, they eat cake, they do all those. But in the end, like obviously too, that's not a healthy lifestyle for anybody. So it's hard for me too, because I think people who do that, and great, if their insulin works, like I wish I was them. I wish I could just take insulin and it worked sometimes if I was eating pasta. Like, wow, that would be amazing. But in all reality, like that doesn't work for everybody. And also I'm like, why would I not treat my body like a temple kind of, if like, and feed it healthily and help my own self? Like no matter what, even if somebody's insulin works and they eat cake and pizza, if somebody's insulin works and they eat vegetables and like healthy carbohydrates and fruit, I'm like, that's still better for your health. And like dealing with diabetes, there's so many long-term effects.
Right.
And so especially even if your blood sugars are good, why hurt your body more so than if you knew, okay, this lifestyle diet, because I don't like to say diet, but that's lifestyle regimen for food, is like the best option and is also going to help you live a longer and happy lifestyle. So it's like, for me, I just think it's so intriguing, and I like want to gain other people's insight and views and be able to share mine too. But it is, yeah, that's kind of why for me doing the LMFT has been definitely on my radar, because I'm like, I would love to be able to help people who don't know or don't have a support system or do want to just complain and not feel like because for me, I think it's hard because I don't want to complain always to my family because I know it hurts them and I see them tear up and I don't want to cause them more stress, but
you need an outlet.
It's hard to also internalize.
Right. Yeah.
And so I go to a therapist because I'm like, for me, I need to be able to release it without them having like not pity, but feeling like, oh, and making them feel bad for me. So it's like nice to have that support system, because my therapist is like, I joke, but he's like one of my best friends. I'm like, woo, because if I didn't have him, I'm like, oh, I have to like release it without feeling like I feel bad for telling them, because I don't want to make them stress out about me. So I think that's kind of why I wanted to be like a service to others in that way, just because I've learned so much from a sports medicine standpoint, even with exercise and how it affects your body, from a mental standpoint with diabetes, a physical activity standpoint with diabetes, nutrition of it, and just being positive too for like not only yourself, but the people around you, and not always making it a, poor me act kind of thing.
Yeah, it's important. I think, I'm giving a talk on Monday about optimism in leadership and the effects of positivity and being optimistic are, very well documented in research as it relates to our health and well-being. And especially when you talk about the effects of stress, I think in most people's lives, stress can be a detrimental effect. And if you're dealing with hormones and a physiological condition, and your stress levels get elevated, whether it's cortisol or adrenaline or things that are working against you, you've got to have a way to manage stress. And just as you've live this full life, because you continue to dance, you continue to go to school, you continue to socialize with your friends, and you do it the way that you need to do it. But you've dealt with this, you've had these outlets. So people, whether it's family, whether it's a close friend, whether it's a therapist, releasing that stress and having a place to, in a healthy way, acknowledge that, hey, I'm having a hard day. It doesn't mean that it's not, I don't have to judge myself for having what'd you call it? A diabetes blowout?
Oh yeah. Diabetes burnout.
Look, it's a real thing, right? It's like we get to this point where life just seems like, I just can't, it just seems too much. But what I hear is, a commitment to a set of behaviors that are consistent with the life you want. And at the end of the day, no matter how you feel, you're finding this sense of resilience. You epitomize, I think, the characteristics of the kind of people that are thriving in this world, because you're not in scarcity, you're in abundance. You're not focused on what you don't have, you're focused on what you can have.
One of the questions I ask people I'm doing workshops is, hey guys, what do you think the number one source of confidence comes from? And people say, I've done this before, I've had this success, or your practice and how you train and prepare. And it's like, well, have you had success before, then show up in the moment and fail? Yes. Have you trained, practiced, and you're prepared, but you get to that performance and the moment's too big, you don't believe in yourself, and you don't do well in that moment? So those are important, but I go back to research from the BBC lab in the UK, Dr. Andrew Lane, 44,000 patients. They found that the number one driver of confidence and performance is self-talk. How do you speak to yourself?
How you speak to
and
yourself.
Then I'll take out a whiteboard and I'll say the brain thinks in 4 dimensions. The first dimensions are the words that we say. These words create pictures in our mind. And these pictures create that third dimension, which is our emotional state. And this emotional state, your cells have memory. It creates your belief system. And then the 2 questions I challenge anybody I'm working with is that thought true? Said by who? So if we can start at the top of this thought cascade and change the words we say to ourselves, the words we say out loud, and Charlie, how much more powerful is our internal language?
So we know from science and we know from research, we covered this morning, that our internal influence is 10 times more powerful than external influences. So what I think about me is 10 times more powerful than what you think about me. The problem is that if I don't know how to talk to myself, then my mind, which has a heavy bias towards negativity, is going to lie to me, and it's going to share with me a lot of things about me that don't serve me. And so how we talk to ourselves, I love that you put that on the top of the list for developing self-confidence, because the math is, if what I think of me is 10 times more powerful than what you think about me, and I'm not talking to myself and you are, 0 times 10 is 0. That means I have no influence over myself whatsoever. And if you're saying anything about me that I'm listening to, 1 times 10 is 10. And so, but no one ever taught me how to talk to myself. I used to listen to myself a lot, but no one ever talked to me how to speak to myself. So, and people are like, you asking me to, is that you asking me to trick my mind? It's like, no, I'm not asking you to trick your mind. I'm asking you to use your mind. And so when you're coaching somebody or training somebody who's facing adversity, challenge, and change, and they're in that spot of, I work with a lot of people, by the way, that are stuck. I work with a lot of people that are coming from substance abuse backgrounds or struggling with addiction. And so we've got a shame-based disease, where we've engaged in unhealthy behaviors. A lot of them have trauma backgrounds. So 85% of people with substance abuse have suffered from childhood trauma. And so they've got a bit of a negative narrative based on the way they've been behaving. So getting them to shift now and start to see themselves differently, it's not a subtle shift, And so when you're working with people, what are the few things that people can start to do to change that narrative and to improve the way they talk to themselves?
Well, the first one is just to master what I call RSA, radical self-acceptance. Have self-love, self-compassion, flaws and all. I think when I stuttered, I didn't like myself because I thought, dude, what's wrong with me? People think, I'm this, I have straight A's and I have friends, but like in these environments, I just would beat myself up. And one of the biggest shift I did prior to going to therapy, prior to going to speech therapy, then doing Toastmasters for 3 years, was I had to say, dude, I stutter sometimes. That's okay. I'm okay with it. I mean, it's just part of what has happened. I can't change what has happened. So it's this acceptance, but it's like, I'm going to commit to move forward and just love myself regardless. So it's just look at yourself. And most people, they wake up in the morning and they focus on everything that they don't have, all their flaws. So if we can just, hey, I love myself. I don't have to be perfect. It's just not the way it is. But if I mess up, it's okay. The world's not going to end. So I think number one is just to, as much as that may sound woo-woo, like there's some healing properties of just like, I'm going to decide and practice loving myself for who I am. Yeah, that to me would be the foundation.
Yeah.
So therapy and be around people who support you, love you, and to maybe write down some strengths, things about yourself. Because I think sometimes we look at TikTok, Instagram, and we start comparing, and we say, I don't have that. We get FOMO, all this stuff, which is exhausting. So let's just train our mind to have that self-compassion, self-love. And then I'm going to give you some prompts to develop, to front load your thinking, and to have a pre-thought game plan, to pre-plan your thoughts. And I say, it begins before it begins. You lost a moment for the moment you started because you had no plan to get into that moment to really help yourself win that moment. And your language is going to be a huge driver of that. And I'm just speaking of experience as a former college athlete, 2 sports. When I was at my best, I had championship self-talk.
Championship self-talk?
So I had it, but I didn't know what that was. I was unconsciously competent. I didn't know. I didn't have any systems on this. So what I would do them is listeners, you want to train confidence. I'm going to give you 3 things you're going to write down now. We're in the mind gym. In the mind gym, we don't just think it, we ink it. The 3 most powerful words are we can say or write it down. Because the pen is mightier than the brain. Because the pen can remember stuff. We're going to forget stuff. So the first thing I'd have you do is when you need a boost of confidence is I want you to write down 3 times when you were really successful, when you accomplished something you're super proud of. The brain keeps a scoreboard of all of our failures. It keeps a scoreboard of all of our losses. It doesn't keep a scoreboard of when we've had success before. That success is just as real as that failure. But most people, when they go into a new environment, they think of, okay, I messed up before, don't screw up. I screwed up here. Like we have this bias for negativity. And then we go back to brain science. Charlie, teach the listeners what % of human thoughts are negative.
80%, 85%.
Yeah. So 4 out of 5. And the research shows we say about 6,000 thoughts to about 70,000 thoughts. So let's do the math. If we're saying 50,000 thoughts a day, that's 40,000 negative thoughts. So I can't guarantee you that being positive always works, Charlie, but we know that negativity always works for the negative. So let's just give ourselves another option. So when you had success before, just remind yourself of those moments. And then to be credible with yourself, let's list some behaviors you're doing to earn the right to be confident with your habits and routines. So like Charlie, for example, you're about to do this podcast. Give me some times of when you've done a great podcast. You've had moments of success. Give me some examples of your training preparation. You've been working with me for 6 months. Dude, you can talk yourself into greatness or out of greatness.
Absolutely. And I think what you're getting, for people that are listening, it's you have eating habits, you have exercise habits, you have thought habits. You just don't know it. And I think, what I'm grateful for today is that, they say if you want to get up and go to the gym, lay your clothes out the night before. One of the things I do to focus on my prayer routine in the morning, people say, put your shoes under your bed, put your keys under your bed. So you start your day on your knees, before you can even go anywhere. It's like we have these little things, but what thought habits do you have? And, that mind is like a 2-year-old. I mean, it's going to whine, kick, and scream and focus on those negatives unless we give it something to think about. So thank you for encouraging our listeners to grab a piece of paper and to grab a pen and write down thoughts that serve you. And I love that you talk about, I think this is really important because there's the concept of toxic positivity, right? There's that kind of bullshitting ourselves, and what you're talking about is something I think is framed in authenticity, which is these are actual statements. You've had success. I think, one of the things you've always encouraged me to do, which I've translated into my coaching now, hunt the good things. What we focus on expands in our lives. Expectancy theory says you focus on good, you'll see more good. And so by writing down these 3 times that you've had success and then these 3 behaviors that allow you to build self-confidence, and then continuing to build reps in the mind gym is so transformative.
And then we're going to add one more. And I teach having what's called anchor statements. Think about a ship in the port, in the water. If there's no anchor, the wind, the waves, we call this the drift. You're going to drift away from the moment. You're not going to be present. You're going to be drifted off at sea. Maybe you go down to this negative thought pattern. So if we have some language, remember we think in 4 dimensions, listeners: words, pictures, emotions, beliefs. Words are tools. Words are tools. The words we speak and think are the wardrobe of our beliefs. So we can improve our words. #TBT, thoughts become things. So these anchor statements is just write down these 3 I am statements that are going to shape your self-image. We know from author James Clear, the number one driver of behaviors is identity. So if we can decide, think about, I used to love as a kid, we'd get this East Bay magazine, East Bay, to order like shoes and gear and all this stuff for the different seasons. This was before Amazon. So that East Bay magazine was like legit. We're so far every month we get new East Bay. And you could pick in that magazine what shoes you want, what shorts you want to wear, what socks or what hat you want to get. So listeners, I would say, who do you want to be? Don't find yourself, create yourself. Pick words and actions that you want to be like. That when people say, who's Heather? Heather, what words do you want people to think about you? We just threw Heather into the podcast.
Always.
You won't be able to hear me.
It's okay. I can tell the listeners. I've had one word. When people think of Heather, what do you want them to think of?
Kind.
Okay, love that. So Heather is going to say, I am kind. As her first pillar of this anchor. We become what we think about most of the time. So let's front load our thinking. Let's decide. Design beats willpower. And pick, I am this, I am this, I am this. And just have them pop up on your phone. Read them every day before you go into a performance. Because if you don't do this, you're going to be searching for confidence. Your brain's going to find ways to stop you. Your brain's going to find ways to keep you playing it safe. So we have to influence, we call this your internal advertising campaign, and that's just going to give you a better chance. Quality thought equals quality movement, negative thought equals negative movement. I'm not going to guarantee this is going to help you, this is going to guarantee a win, but it's going to give you a better chance.
It is, and it's that concept of, having, I think, what I've learned to call a performance mindset. and a performance mindset is actually something that identifies and focuses on the done wells. It gives credit where credit's due. And I think that's so important that we talk about that, because we are so apt to focus on our failures. And this is a thought strategy, that everybody can use. And it's I like the concept of preloading. It's like, I'm in charge of my thoughts. Well, if I'm in charge of them, what do I want them to be? And I can tell you that when asked that question, when people think of me, what do I want them to think of? That Heather popped up kind. I mean, most people that I speak with haven't thought about who they are or who they want to be. They think about what they want, how many likes they want, how many followers they want, what house they want to live in, when. My friend Mike Diamond calls it destination disease. When I get there, then I'll be happy. And we chase that to the point of always needing instead of always having. And we always can have. And when I say have, I don't mean all of those things. I mean, you can have the very best of peace of mind, of happiness, of serenity, of peace, of contentment, of fulfillment, based on healthy self-image and then a bunch of healthy self-behaviors.